Welcome back, everybody. I'm Nathan Barnatt, former gravedigger from spooky old New England, and you're watching Grave Stories. Oh boy, do I have a good one today. This is one of the most fascinating cases I've ever heard. It involves alternate dimensions and a man possibly slipping on accident into ours. I know it sounds insane, but this is true, so you just have to watch. It's a very famous case that many people have talked about and dove into for years, and people have tried to solve this. It happened in the 50s, and it wasn't solved until a couple of years ago. So strap in and be prepared to be scared. And if you didn't know, I am this close to hitting 500,000 subscribers after 16 years of being on YouTube. I'm almost halfway to 1 million. Maybe I'll hit 1 million someday. If people start watching and getting notified, it would really help me out. So if you click the bell, you'll be guaranteed to be notified when I upload, and then the flow of the algorithm will hopefully benefit me. So if you like these and you want to watch more, every Monday there's going to be one. I think every other Friday I'm going to upload the Reddit episodes and possibly do some Thursday, Wednesday episodes here and there when I can. But every week there will be at least 1 or 2 uploads. So please click the bell if you want to see what's going on. And if you have YouTube Premium, please download the episodes because I think it helps boost us in the algorithm. Not quite sure. It's what people have been saying on the internet, so may as well try it. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy this one, and let's get right to it. This is the true story of the man from Torrid. It's a pretty famous case. There's a lot of articles on it. There's a lot of videos on it. I've heard about this one for a long time. I've read a lot of these articles, and there was never any conclusion or explanation as to how this happened, where this man came from, who he was, until very recently. The story begins like this. In 1954, a man landed at the Tokyo Haneda airport. The man's name was Ak Ziegler, and he had landed from an unknown country. He spoke Japanese fluently, and he had a slight French accent. He also had brown hair and a beard. He looked like a very average guy. So the story begins when he lands at the Tokyo airport. He walks to customs and tries to enter the country, but he's stopped by the customs officers when they question him about his strange passport. John's passport says the country he is from is Torrid. The officer tells him Torrid isn't a country. John says, yes it is, I'm from there. The officer is now confused and calls over another officer to look at the passport. This other officer also doesn't recognize Torrid, and neither of them recognize the type of passport he has. They ask him if the passport is fake, and he says no. John shows them all the pages he has in his passport that have stamps from other countries he's traveled to, and no one has ever questioned him before. They look at the stamps. The stamps are all legitimate. They're all real stamps from other places, so he's not faking this. This is a real passport, but it's from a country they've never heard of. This baffles the customs officers. They don't understand how they've never seen a passport from a country. They work in an airport. They've seen every country. Unsure of what to do, they call their bosses, and the bosses take him into holding, and they begin questioning him. So now he's in this room being questioned by all these police officers, and luckily he speaks Japanese, so he's able to talk to them. And also the fact that he speaks Japanese shows them that he has traveled to this country before with this passport. So he's already done this, and he knows how to speak Japanese, and he's already been to Japan. He tells the officers that his native language is French, and they can also hear the French accent in his voice. Now, John is just as confused as they are. How can they have never heard of Torrid, and they work at an airport? This is blowing his mind. Why does no one understand him, and why does no one believe him? They said, well, we would have seen someone else from Torrid by now. How are you the only one who's traveled here? John is now feeling pretty anxious because he's being held and he hasn't done anything wrong. He also has a business meeting he has to get to. He tells the officers he has a meeting at a company in Tokyo. They ask him the name of the company, then they call the company. They ask the company if they have a meeting with him. The company says, we've never heard of him. We don't know who you're talking about, and he has no meeting here. Now John's starting to look kind of suspicious. John is blown away by this. He says, yes, I do. I'm going there. I don't know what they're talking about. Why is this happening? It seems that everything is against him now. So finally, the officers say, okay, show us where Torrid is on a map. They take the map out, and instantly John goes and points right to Andorra, which is right between France and Spain. It's right above Spain and right below France. If you haven't heard of Andorra, it's pretty small. It's the smallest state in Europe. Now, right where John is pointing, it says the word Andorra. This blows John's mind. He says, that's not Andorra. I've never heard of Andorra. This is Torrid. It's been around for 1,000 years. I've lived there my whole life. He tells them the city he's from is Tamanrasset. And the way he's talking to them is very believable. The police officers are also thinking, why would this guy make this up? This is such a random thing to fake. It's only getting him in trouble. So they don't quite disbelieve him. They just don't understand what to do because they can't let him in the country unless he has a valid passport. They've just never heard of this country. John's feeling at a loss. He tells them they speak French in his country. He speaks French. He shows them. He speaks Japanese. He shows them he's been to Japan, but they're not getting anywhere with this conversation. So, not knowing what to do, they decide to hold him in a hotel for the night and figure it out tomorrow. They're going to put him up and he's going to stay somewhere for free. And then tomorrow they'll bring him back in for more questioning and hopefully figure out what to do. So John goes into this hotel room at a hotel very close to the airport, and he's guarded all night. He goes into the hotel room, the cops lock the door, and then 2 guards watch the door all night. He doesn't come in, doesn't go out, no one goes in. They sit there and wait. In the morning, the guards open the door, and John's gone. No trace of John anywhere. There's also no signs of escape, and the hotel room was on the 5th floor, and the window wasn't open, which it would have had to have been if he went out the window. He couldn't have closed it when he then went down on the ground. And if he did escape, how did he get all of his luggage out of the 5th floor down to the ground and himself without anyone noticing? No one at the hotel reported anything. The hotel staff, guests, no one saw a man jumping out the 5th story window with all of his luggage and then also closing the window on his way down. And he definitely would have hurt himself jumping out a 5th story window. So that's pretty much the story that everyone has heard. Now, this is where the other dimension comes into play. And one of the explanations is that we live in a world that has multiple dimensions. This is something people talk about all the time. And the dimensions run very closely to each other. And what might have happened was there was a ripple in time and John accidentally crossed over into our dimension. Then the universe corrected itself when the error was acknowledged and it took him back to his dimension. That's how we have such a clean escape, and the man just disappeared in thin air, and also how he appeared in thin air. And John happened to be from a dimension where Andorra was known as Torrid. What people say is there's slight changes in our dimensions. They're very similar because they started at the same time, but it's like the butterfly effect. When one thing happens here, it changes things slightly, and in his dimension, one thing led to another, causing that country to be named Torrid. In ours, it was named Andorra. Sounds crazy, but it's a theory, and it's really the only thing people have thought because there's no other information and no one knows what else could have happened. So that's the story on John Ak Ziegler. He's become very popular folklore and an internet legend. And that's all the information we've ever had on him until 2020. Since there was no internet in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and barely the 90s, we've never been able to find any more information on John Ak Ziegler. But now, thanks to Reddit users who've dug in much deeper, we've been given the full story of the man from Torrid. In 2020, the Reddit user NalCarJ posted original newspaper clippings from the 1960s that wrote about the man from Torrid. This led to all the puzzle pieces coming together, giving us the full picture. We now know the entire story of what really happened. The newspaper articles talked about John Ak Ziegler, who landed in Japan on a flight from Taiwan. He was with his wife and not alone. When in Taiwan, they were not questioned by authorities. They got their stamps and their passports, and then they boarded the plane to Japan. Now, when they landed in Japan, they were not stopped by the customs officers, and they entered the country totally fine. But over the next few days, John was caught robbing 2 banks in Tokyo. He was arrested, put in jail, and then he went on trial in court. It was in court where his passport and documents were brought into question. He had a fake passport that said he was from Torrid. Now, the spelling was a little different. It wasn't T-A-U-R-E-D, it was T-U-A-R-E-D. A slight difference, but when the story was told over time, the spelling changed. At the end of the trial, John was proven guilty and sentenced to 1 year in prison. Hearing this, John lost his mind. He totally freaked out. He took a piece of glass that he had hidden in his mouth, and he tried to kill himself by stabbing himself with the glass. He was unsuccessful, and he was thrown in jail. A few months later, John admitted that he wasn't actually from Torrid, but he was from the United States. John Ak Ziegler was an American con artist traveling the world with a fake passport, robbing banks. He was able to get away with it for so long because in the 1950s, people didn't quite know every single country in the world. All the air travel was relatively new, so people weren't doubting his passport or countries that they've never heard of, because they haven't heard of many countries. This story reminds me a lot of the tale of Frank Abagnale, which is another true story. The movie Catch Me If You Can is based on this man. It's a story of a man who traveled the world for free, pretending to be a pilot, because no one would have ever imagined someone would fake something like that. So he just walked on planes with a pilot's uniform on, and no one doubted him, because they just assumed he was a pilot. It was a much different world that Frank Abagnale and John Ak Ziegler lived in. You can't quite get away with these things nowadays. The Man from Torrid was basically a big game of telephone where the information got jumbled over the years. Now here are a few more details to shed light on the origin of this story. The city of Tamanrasset, where John said he was from, is real. Tamanrasset is an actual city in Algeria where there's a big population of Tuareg people. So people hearing the story over the years, hearing that detail about Tuareg, they then remembered it as Torrid. So, a 70-year-old tale of a man possibly being trapped in the wrong dimension finally got debunked, thanks to Reddit. There you go, everyone. Mysterious case of the Man from Torrid solved. So if you liked it, please click the bell. Watch all of the other Grave Stories episodes. I'm putting out a lot of them. If you click the bell, you will actually be notified when I upload, so you won't miss any. Please help me. We can conquer the algorithm together and bring me finally to the top. I will reach 500,000 subscribers. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time.